So, today we're going to be speaking we're going to be starting a new series. And this series is not a new thing. It's something that has been around for a little while. My glasses are breaking. That's not good. But make no mistake, this is the book we'll be speaking from. But we're going to use themes and concepts from this book. It's a book that was introduced to us by Jeremy McLaughlin, who was a kid here and then was a pastor here, and then now he's a pastor up in Wisconsin, up in Green Bay. It's called No Perfect People Allowed, and those who are perfect need to leave now, because I'm not dealing with you. But I could count on Harold. Here's the premise, and today is to be the kind of the table setter for as we go forward. And the premise is this: this is not your father's Oldsmobile. The church that we live in today and the society that we live in today is not the church and the society that maybe your grandpa or your dad or your grandpa's grandpa dealt with. We went through an interesting time in the United States where Christianity was the default religion. You were either Christian or you weren't. You weren't like a bunch of other things. Those things existed, but we just didn't know about them today, like we know about them today. We didn't have all these options and things we could go through. And so we're going to be talking about some of that. When we talk about what we're doing, we're talking about growing the Church of Jesus Christ. We were told by Christ to go and make disciples among all the nations. And the job description's still here. We're still supposed to do that. That's still what we're supposed to do. And as we discussed in Sunday school this morning, we're on like week 12 of this. And by the way, this isn't going to be a 12-week series, but it's going to be like 18 weeks of us talking about this class in there. But as we talked about this morning, there is no new sin under the sun. The sin that exists today was the sin that existed in Jesus' time and was the sin that existed fairly shortly after we got kicked out of Eden. Same stuff. No new and amazing thing. Sodom and Gomorrah, ring a bell? Nothing new happening here. The difference is we all know about it now. It's all in our face all the time. We constantly are seeing and looking at this junk in our face and having choices of choosing that junk in our face, if that's what we want. Okay. So let's start with this piece of Scripture. John 4:35. John 4:35. I'm going to start about halfway through. He says, I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for the harvest. We cannot complain that there is nobody out there who is outside of our faith. I think you could honestly get in a time machine and go back 80 years and you could say, well, everybody's heard of Christianity. Everybody has made that choice or not made that choice. It was just who you were. But if the fields are ripe for the harvest, if we're going out into these fields and attempting to grow things, to grow our church and to grow our faith, I think the first question we have to ask is, what would it take, what would it look like for this church to be a place where you could grow that faith, where you could, as we say right out there on the top of our wall, where we could create people or make people or introduce people into a relationship with Jesus Christ? What would it take for us to be that church? And that's our question over the next few weeks. What would it take for you, Southside, to put people in a right relationship with Jesus Christ? What would it take for us to grow that? So whenever I've done this class, and sometimes you have inspirational and spiritual services, and sometimes you have educational ones. Today we'll call this an educational one with a spiritual bent. If we're choosing to grow something in that Southside church, if this is supposed to be a place to grow, we've got all these things we could do, things we could put in that pot, or things we could put in that vessel to grow these people in relationship with Jesus Christ. If we're going to grow something in that pot, we've got choices. We got topsoil, we got fertilizer, we got some pebbles and some water and some manure we could put in that vessel to grow. Right? So what are some things that would make a good choice? Well, if Jessica was here, she would ruin this for me just like she did in class one time. The first question is, what are we growing? Goldfish. What I did with them the first time was I gave them the vessel and I gave them the stuff. And everybody starts putting pebbles in the bottom because you know about putting the pebbles in the bottom so the water can flow away. And then you put the good topsoil in there and we put the fertilizer sticks, and then I took out the bag of goldfish. Probably not going to grow many goldfish in that. Probably should have just put the pebbles in the bottom in the water and skipped it, right? That's the question we have to ask here. Are we putting soil and manure and pebbles in the vessel where we're trying to grow fish? Perfectly good stuff to grow corn. Not very good to grow fish. So what we have to find out first is, what are we growing? The George Barna Group, or Barna Research Group, by the way, if you want to be depressed, read some Barna research about the church. And pastors always pull that out when they want to whack you with something. So get ready. The George Barna Group says that today is the first time in the history of the United States when people are looking for a religion that their first choice is not Christianity. We're not number one. We're not the only choice. We're not even the first choice. Kind of unsettling, isn't it? But what that does to us is it says, we got to shift the way that we're working here, folks. One of the most disturbing things in this book, and one of the things that as you're reading it along, you're going, yeah, ugh, is a conversation between the guy who wrote this and a young man that he sat down with who had asked to talk to him, and they went out to lunch, and he talks to him, and he's going through, how the one sacrifice has been made and how Jesus loves him, and this is great, and the plan of salvation, and he gets through with all of it, and the whole time he's been talking, the young man's been going, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that makes sense. Sure, yeah. And then he says, so are you ready to accept Christ? And he goes, no. Why not? He says, no, I can see how what you were saying makes sense. It all makes sense. I get it. I really do. I just don't want to be like you. Whoa. I don't want to be like you. Today's society does run differently in many ways. And it's because of all this information that we have. When you look at the divorce rate in this country and you think that you understand that that's a problem because these people who were married are no longer together, you need to recognize some things that does. There are enough people divorced in this room that I'm telling you that probably 50% of the people who were married in this room are at least maybe on their second marriage. So, look, I'm not looking to beat that, but I'm here to say what has happened is we've created mistrust. To children who have grown up in that situation, now that thing that they thought was eternal and absolutely positively no way that would be wrong or any different, Mom and Daddy are going to be together, right? So that's a thing. No. So we broke that. Now, we send them off into a world where they can look up anything that you tell them on Google and find out that half the stuff you told them is probably not true, or at least they're allowed to have a different opinion. Wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. That's not true. Let me show you that that's not true. The number of people who believe in what we say and follow what we say is to be true has reduced horribly. The number of people who are married and arrive there as virgins is like 3%. 3%. Okay? Which means, of all the people in this room, that's not a surprise. Because 20% of the religious people arrive in marriage as virgins. Of the people who live together before they get married, today 48% of women live with their spouse before they get married. Of the people who live with someone before they get married, 50% of those people still get divorced. My point is, the things that we value are not the things that are being valued out there. They just aren't. And it's not that we're right and they're wrong. You can't approach it from that direction, because if you look at the numbers, they will tell you that this is the way that it is, and that you live in a fantasy world, they don't. So if we look at a world where by the time a child is 19, every year that they have existed, they have been exposed to a sex act or intimate conversation about sex 14,000 times per year on their TVs, how can we arrive at a position where we can tell them that our Christian values and the way that we walk is the normal way and the way that things should be? This is where we're growing people. This is where we're growing Christians today, is in that world. Now, we can say to ourselves, well, that's awful, and I'm going to be in a different world, but that's just not reality. We have to start from where we're at. We have to find people where they are and move them forward. In Matthew 13, 3 through 9, let's find that. Jesus starts speaking in parables to these folks about how they're going to grow, what they have to grow. And he says, backing up to before, a farmer went out to sow his seed, and he was scattering the seed, and some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. And some fell in the rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up and the plants were scorched, they were withered because there was no root. Other seeds fell along the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell in the good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, and 30 times what was sown. He who has ears, let him hear. The question is, how do we become the good soil? How do we become that place? There's constantly this reference in the book about this come as you are church. And I think for some people, this idea of a come as you are church can seem repulsive. It can seem like what we're saying is come and be who you are, and don't be respectful and be rude and be mean. And that's not what they're referring to at all. When they refer to a come as you are church, what would be the important parts of building a come as you are church here? How would we deal with that here? I think we can see in the church in Corinth an example given to us by Paul about how you would do that. Let's find 1 Corinthians 9, 19 through 23. I'll find that for you. Who are the people at the church of Corinth, and who is Paul talking about, and why is this something relevant to what we're dealing with? Because clearly this was thousands of years ago, and these people weren't like the people today. No, I would argue completely that these are very much the same people that we're dealing with today. In order to understand who the church at Corinth was, you have to understand that Corinth was a trading city in between the Greek world and the Middle East. There was tons of trade going through this city. It was a very metropolitan place. They had 24 hours a day, 7-day-a-week service for pretty much anything that you wanted. They had, interesting fun fact to know and tell about the Church of Corinth, just before Paul had gotten there, they had changed the church, the government-sponsored religion, but before that, the government-sponsored religion was the orgy church. And no, that's not some different weird word. No, they meant the same thing. So that was what was going on with these folks. They had all the books that they want. They had plenty of trade going through, lots of different cultures occurring there, lots of different things going on in the area. And what we hear is Paul landing with these people and how he dealt with it. And this is how he dealt with it. Though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became like a Jew, to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but I am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. What does Paul mean when he says, I became a slave to everyone? Does that mean that he went and did whatever they were doing, no matter what? No. What it means is that he became a servant to them. He helped to move them forward. He did what was necessary to move them forward. To the Greeks, he became a Greek. He would sit with them and discuss with them and be a part of what they were doing and understand what they were doing. To the Jews, he was very well versed in this, and he would go with them and understand what they were doing and be a part of what they were doing. In order to make this a place to grow, one of the first things that we have to do is to go out to where they are and understand who they are and grasp what their world is like, so that we understand who they are when they come here, so they can be a part of us. What is a come as you are church? A come as you are church is a church that accepts people when they come in this building and loves them for who they are and speaks to them for who they are. What does it look like for this building to become a come-as-you-are church? First, it becomes a mindset. It becomes Paul's mindset. Can you sit with someone who doesn't have your Christian values and doesn't understand your Christian values and see them as a child of God and sit and speak with them as a child of God? As someone who has value. And not start off with telling them what they're doing wrong. Can we teach them and show them the value of what we have so that they'll want that? If you were to go out into the community today and ask them, who is Southside Church of the Nazarene? If they knew, what is that vibe that they have about who we are? What's that? The one with the egg drop. Is that a bad thing? The one with the egg drop, is that a bad thing? I'd argue not. I'd argue it makes it sound inviting. It makes it a place to be. What's that? It draws a crowd. To quote John Wesley, if you want a crowd, stand in the middle of the city court and set yourself on fire. Now do something with that. Right? Now the question is, how can we make what their perception of us is go beyond that egg drop? How can we make what their perception of us is go beyond that? I would argue that there are people in this room who, if they're honest, would say, it's that place I go and play basketball. It's that place with 4 softball teams. All right? What's that? It's a place you're welcome. What does it take, though, Loretta? I'm not going to answer all your questions today. I'm probably going to leave you with more questions than I'm going to answer. What does it take? And you know I'm not just asking you, I'm asking everybody in the room. What does it take for us to be that place where you're welcome? Yeah. 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 What does it take, I ask us, and we'll look through as we go through this journey with this book. What does it take for this church to become a place that people think of when they have a problem or when they're hurting or when they need help? What does it take for us to be the place where people feel like they can come when they're hurting or they have an issue? What does it take for this to become a place where people think they would like to go to be uplifted? What does it take for this to be a place where people feel like they can find friends and feel connected? As we go through some other things besides this sermon series, one of the big things for the board here and for the pastoral staff here and for the staff here is for people to feel like this is a place to get connected. Because we have Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and chat and all these different ways to be connected. But the truth is, you're not connected to any of those people in the way that a lot of these folks want to be. This generation that is coming up right now values connection and friendship and loyalty more than they value a good job and a place to live. They do. And so if what they get from this group when they come in is not that connection, is not that feeling of being loved and cared for, is not that feeling that this is a place to grow those relationships, then they won't be back. Because if all it is a place to talk and a place for people to tell them what they should and shouldn't be doing, they got Facebook for that. They don't need you for that. What does it look like to do this? This is what we'll be talking about over the next few weeks. What does it look like to do this? And if I were to ask for us to pray for anything today as we finish, if you guys would come on back up. It is that we would be a vessel filled with things that would make this church grow and that would grow their relationship with Jesus Christ. I don't care if there's 15 people here next weekend. If they're growing people in relationship with Christ. So let me make sure you understand when I say grow, what I mean grow. I want to be a place where I feel like I can call you at 2 a.m. and tell you, I'm hurting and I need help. I want this to be a place where Mike feels like if he's got an issue, he can call me and I will get to him wherever I'm at. I want this to be a place where Tom and Melinda can find me and know that I want to go to a ball game with them and sit and talk about raising grown-ups together. That's what people want from this church. And oddly enough, if you read about this Jesus guy, that's what he had. And that's what he felt like was important. So I pray that we can make this a place to grow, a place to introduce people to the fact that he loves us.